This wellness session is provided to you by the CCHS Wellness Team. Please contact CCHS Wellness at cchealth.org if you have any questions. I'm Luca, and today I'll be talking about drawing from disabled knowledge and wisdom to make space for rest. Some highlights about me: I'm a queer, trans, non-binary, mixed-race, licensed marriage and family therapist practicing on unceded Chochenyo Ohlone land, or Oakland, California. I am also disabled and neuroqueer. I use they, them, and he, him pronouns. If folks want to learn more about me, they could read from this page or go to my website where I share more about my clinical practices and values. A quick reminder is that this presentation draws from the following sources and my own lived experiences. When I talk with abled folks about what gets in the way of their rest, I often hear these responses. I don't have the time, I have to work, I'll rest later, my parents never rested, how could I don't know how to rest, I should be able to push through, quote, not doing anything, unquote, sounds lazy. These are the same folks who are overwhelmed, overworked, and burnt out. Rest gets bumped down to a non-priority, and these responses, I think, are largely influenced by capitalism's pressures to produce. Within the capitalist system that we live in, value is attached to the body and the productivity of that body. You can either be working in the ways that capitalism demands and be seen as good, worthy, and valued, or if you cannot work in those ways, then you are bad, less worthy, and devalued. Disabled folks are disproportionately impacted by capitalism's demands to produce because many of us are unable to meet these harsh expectations. Leah Lakshmi Papisna Samarasinha captures this by saying, capitalism says that disabled, tired bodies that spend too much time in bed are useless. Anyone who cannot create wealth for owners is useless. People are valued only for the wealth they labor to build for capitalism. Cribs are useless to capitalism. Disabled folks, especially queer and trans disabled folks of color, have always had to navigate oppressive systems of capitalism, white supremacy, and ableism, all of which are connected. Our collective history is rich with examples of pushing back against these systems, by creating the framework of disability justice, by dreaming up spaces where access is centered, by building care networks made up of both abled and disabled folks, by reinforcing that disability is not an inconvenience or something to be cured, by organizing performance projects explicitly celebrating disabled body, minds, and sexuality, by sharing disabled knowledge and healing practices with each other, and by keeping each other alive when we are forgotten by abled folks. Disability justice rejects attaching value to the body's capacity for productivity and highlights that all of our bodies are valuable just by being, and they all have needs that must be met. Rest fits nicely into this framework. Rest goes beyond napping and sleeping, though these are very important as well and are not to be overlooked. Rest is also an intentional space where we think up worlds outside of capitalism and ableism, where we dream of centering accessibility rather than it being an afterthought, where we let our bodies release the tension created by capitalism, where we grieve the ways in which we have been coerced into thinking that our worth is connected to productivity. As Trisha Hersey of the NAP Ministry states, resting is about getting people back to their truest selves, to what they were before capitalism robbed you of your ability to just be, and that we must be intentional about reimagining what we believe rest is and can be for our lives. As somatic teacher Prentice Hemphill says, rest is a part of the cycle that happens inside of us as living organisms, that is part of the cycle of restoration, also of expression, and we must operate in those cycles. And when we don't, And when we insist that the body must always perform, that the body must always produce, it's that logic that shaves time off of our lives. It's important just on a biological level to understand rest is a part of what it means to be alive. An important clarification is that rest is not meant to be quote unquote used. I'm not talking about a model of rest where we go home early and take a nap just to spring back into work. And I'm not talking about doing any of this alone. When we stay in a framework of individuals being solely responsible for their own care, we perpetuate loneliness and isolation, and disabled folks are already isolated from each other. I invite folks to imagine what it might be like to create and share collective resting spaces. For some, especially those of us who come from working class or immigrant families with members who push through pain and illness, the idea of rest can seem like a luxury that our older generations were not afforded. It can therefore bring up feelings of guilt for needing or practicing rest. I appreciate Gabrielle Zhuang Estrin's approach to the concept of rest and privilege. She asks, what did our ancestors want for us? What did they want us to feel in this moment with all the sacrifices and surviving they did to give us some ease? We are their benefactors, and maybe our debt to them is to feel a little bit more free, and maybe that is rest. Many disabled folks inherently understand the importance of rest. We understand that we have to build slowness into our everyday. We also push past our own capacities all the time because of the pressures to make ends meet, because of internalized shame about asking for the help we need. We do our best to be in partnership with our bodies as much as we can. Leah Lakshmi Pisna Sarmasinha reminds us that resting, being in bed, creating from bed is where some of our wildest dreams can be dreamt up. They write, the joy of this body comes from Crip community and interdependence, but most of all, of the hard beauty of this life, built around all the time I must spend resting. The bed is the Nepantla of place of opening. In thinking of rest, I wonder, what does rest mean to you? How do you arrive at rest? What are your assumptions, judgments, or expectations about needing rest, or about others needing rest? How will you protect your resting space? How will you make space for others to rest? In sum, capitalism does not value disabled bodies, which leads us to create our own communities of care outside of a bootstrap or individualized productivity mindset. We need to make space for slowness, rest, and sustainability, all while being in community. Rest is about sleep, easefulness, and resisting capitalist systems. This benefits both abled and disabled folks. Increased accessibility to rest benefits everyone. Disabled knowledge is sacred and genius. Disabled folks are healers. We are teachers. We have skills that go unrecognized. In all of the ways that we see and listen, I encourage us to tune in more deeply to communities that continue to be left behind. Thank you for receiving. I wish you all restfulness.